Sunday morning was quiet on Willowbrook Drive. The rally crowd had gone home. The news trucks had left, and the only evidence of the previous day's celebration was the lingering scent of barbecue smoke and a few small American flags left scattered in the grass. Karen had spent the night staring at her ceiling, Mrs. Chen's kindness replaying in her mind alongside every harsh word she'd spoken to Miguel. The plate of food sat untouched on her nightstand. She hadn't been able to eat a bite. At 7 a.m., she made a decision that terrified her more than any confrontation she'd ever started. She got dressed, walked across the street, and knocked on Miguel's door. He answered in his pajamas and robe, coffee mug in hand, looking surprised and wary. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the lines that hadn't been there a week ago. "Mrs. Pemberton, is everything okay?" Karen opened her mouth to deliver the speech she practiced, full of diplomatic language about community standards and misunderstandings. Instead, what came out was, "I'm sorry." Miguel blinked. "I'm sorry what?" "I'm sorry," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong. About the flag, about the rules, about everything." They stood there in his doorway for a long moment, the morning birds singing around them like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't shifted on its axis. Would you like to come in?" Miguel asked finally. His living room was simple and clean, dominated by a bookshelf filled with medical journals and photographs. Karen found herself drawn to the pictures. Miguel in his army uniform, looking impossibly young. Miguel with a woman who must have been his wife, both of them laughing. Miguel in hospital scrubs with other nurses, tired, but smiling after what looked like a long shift. "My wife died 2 years ago," Miguel said quietly, noticing her attention. "Breast cancer. She always said she wanted us to display the flag properly, especially around the holidays. I kept putting it off because it felt too final, I guess. Like I was admitting she wasn't coming back to see it." Karen felt her chest tighten. "Miguel, I'm not telling you this for sympathy," he continued, settling into his recliner. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand. That flag isn't about defying your HOA rules. It's about keeping a promise to my wife and honoring the country I served, and maybe feeling a little less alone in this house." Karen sat down on his couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I didn't know about your wife." "Why would you? We never talk." In 3 years of living across the street from each other, the longest conversation we'd had before this week was when I helped you carry groceries that time you threw out your back. The shame hit her like a physical weight. "You helped me carry groceries. 17 bags. You just come back from Costco, and you were struggling. I offered to help, and you said—" Miguel paused, and she could see him deciding whether to continue. "What did I say?" "You said you didn't want to impose, and then you asked if I was legal." Karen closed her eyes. She remembered now. She'd been flustered and embarrassed, and the words had just come out. Miguel had gone very quiet, finished helping her with the bags, and walked away without another word. "I'm Puerto Rican," Miguel said calmly. "Born in San Juan, served 2 tours in Vietnam, worked as a nurse for 40 years. I'm probably more American than apple pie, but you looked at my skin and my name and made an assumption." "Miguel, I don't know how to." "You want to know the funny part?" He took a sip of his coffee. "After yesterday's rally, after all those people came to support me, I kept thinking about you, about how alone you looked in your house, watching everyone else celebrate. And I thought, she's probably never had neighbors bring her food just because they care. Am I right?" Karen felt tears threatening for the first time in years. "How can you be kind to me after what I've done?" "Because being angry is exhausting," Miguel said simply. "And because my wife always said that hurt people hurt people." She was good at seeing the pain underneath the anger. They sat in silence for a while, the morning sun streaming through Miguel's windows and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Karen found herself looking at his bookshelf again, at all the evidence of a life lived in service to others. "I don't know how to fix this," she said finally. "What do you want to fix?" 3 weeks later, Karen stood in her front yard at 6:30 a.m., but this time she wasn't typing angry messages or taking violation photos. She was holding a small American flag and a screwdriver, trying to figure out how to install her own flag holder. "You're doing it wrong," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Miguel walking across the street in his work clothes, carrying a proper drill and a cup of coffee. "I brought reinforcements," he said, holding up the drill. "Flag holders are tricky." "I can figure it out," Karen protested, then immediately caught herself. "I mean, I'd appreciate the help." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Miguel drilling pilot holes while Karen held the bracket steady. It was strange how normal it felt, working alongside the man she considered her nemesis just 3 weeks ago. "So," Miguel said carefully, "how did the board meeting go?" Karen winced. The previous night's AOA meeting had been brutal. She'd resigned from her position as compliance officer, formally apologized for her actions regarding Miguel's flag, and proposed new guidelines that would explicitly protect reasonable patriotic displays. The room had been packed with neighbors, most of whom had listened in cold silence. "I'm no longer the neighborhood enforcement officer," she said. "Jim Matthews thinks it's best if I step back from community leadership for a while. How do you feel about that?" Karen considered the question while Miguel tightened the screws. 3 weeks ago, losing her HOA position would have felt like losing her identity. Now, relieved, actually. "I think I was using the rules as an excuse to avoid actually connecting with people. And now," she gestured toward her flag, which Miguel was helping her unfold. "Now I'm learning that being a good neighbor is more important than being a rule-following neighbor." As they raised the flag together, Karen noticed curtains twitching in windows up and down the street. The neighborhood was watching, waiting to see what would happen next in the saga of HOA Karen and the veteran next door. Mrs. Chen was the first to emerge from her house, walking over with 2 cups of coffee and a smile. "Beautiful morning for flag hanging," she said, offering them the cups. "Miguel, Karen, you both did good work here." Soon other neighbors began to appear. The Johnson twins, home for summer break, brought pastries from the local bakery. Mr. Kowalski wheeled his oxygen tank over to inspect Miguel's flag installation technique. Even families Karen had never spoken to beyond TERS violation notices stopped by to chat. Karen woke up Saturday morning to the sound of cars parking on her usually quiet street. Lots of cars. She stumbled to her window in her silk pajamas and felt her heart stop. There were at least 30 people in Miguel's front yard, and more arriving by the minute. Red, white, and blue everywhere. American flags of every size, veterans in uniform, families with children holding smaller flags, and news crews, actual news crews, setting up cameras. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Karen muttered, grabbing her phone. 17 missed calls from Diane, 43 unread messages in the neighborhood group chat, and a text from her own mother. "Saw you on Channel 7 News. Call me. Now." The banner stretched across Miguel's front yard rate, supporting OVETRANs and the right to fly Old Glory. A reporter was interviewing Miguel, who looked overwhelmed but grateful as neighbors patted his shoulders and shook his hands. Karen's doorbell rang. Then again. Then someone started knocking. She peeked through the peephole to see Jim Matthews standing on her porch, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Behind him were 2 other HOA board members she recognized, and they all looked furious. "Karen, open the damn door." She cracked it open, keeping the chain latch on. "Jim, I can explain." "No explaining. We're here to tell you that as of this morning, the HOA board is officially dropping any action regarding Miguel's flag display. This ends now. But the rules don't matter when Channel 7 is doing a live broadcast about HOA overreach, and your face is going to be on every news station from here to the state capitol. Karen felt her carefully constructed world crumbling. It was never about the flag itself. It was about proper procedures. "Nobody cares about your procedures." Jim exploded. "Do you know what the reporter just asked me? She asked if our HOA regularly harasses veterans for displaying the American flag. What was I supposed to say to that?" Through her window, Karen could see the crowd growing. Someone had brought a grill. Children were running around with small flags. It looked less like a protest and more like a block party celebrating everything she tried to stop. "I need to fix this," Karen said, more to herself than to Jim. "No, you need to disappear until this blows over," Jim replied. "The last thing we need is you out there making it worse." But Karen wasn't listening anymore. She was watching Miguel through her window, seeing how uncomfortable he looked with all the attention, how he kept trying to redirect conversations away from himself and toward the other veterans in the crowd. He hadn't asked for this rally. He just wanted to hang a flag. After Jim and the board members left, Karen sat at her kitchen table, still in her pajamas, watching the celebration outside. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, Facebook posts, news articles, tweets, all featuring her as the villain in a David and Goliath story where she definitely wasn't David. But something else was bothering her, something beyond her damaged reputation and the public humiliation. It was the look on Miguel's face when she confronted him that first morning. Not angry, not defensive, just tired, like he'd dealt with people like her his whole life and was simply enduring one more. Her laptop chimed with a new email. The subject line made her stomach drop. Channel 7 interview request. HOA flag controversy. Karen closed the laptop without reading it. Outside, someone had started playing patriotic music, and the smell of barbecue was drifting through her windows. It should have been annoying. There were definitely noise ordinance violations happening. But instead, it just made her feel more alone. She found herself thinking about her father, who died when she was 12. He'd been a veteran too, Korea, and he'd flown a flag every single day until the cancer took him. She remembered how proud he'd been of that flag, how he taught her to fold it properly, how he'd explained what each star and stripe meant. When had she forgotten that? Her doorbell rang again. But this time it wasn't Jim or angry board members. Through the peephole, she saw Mrs. Chen holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. "Mrs. Pemberton." The older woman called softly. "I brought you some food from the barbecue. I thought you might be hungry." Karen stared at the door for a long moment. Mrs. Chen was Miguel's friend, one of the neighbors who'd laughed at her paint color expertise. She had every right to be petty, to let Karen sit alone while the whole street celebrated without her. But she brought food anyway. Karen slowly unlatched the chain and opened the door. "Mrs. Chen, why?" The older woman smiled sadly. "Because you're our neighbor too, Karen. Even when you're wrong, you're still our neighbor." As Karen took the warm plate, she could hear the crowd behind Mrs. Chen singing "God Bless America." And for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than anger or embarrassment. She felt ashamed. Karen Pemberton's manicured fingernails clicked against her phone screen as she typed furiously, standing in her perfectly landscaped front yard at 6:47 am. The message to the Willowbrook HOA group chat was already 3 paragraphs long, and she was just getting started. "This is absolutely unacceptable. The noise ordinance clearly states no construction before 8 am. Yet Mr. Rodriguez has been hammering since 6:30. And don't get me started on the paint color. That shade of blue is not on the approved palette." She paused, squinting at the modest ranch house across the street, where Miguel Rodriguez was quietly installing a small American flag holder beside his front door. The soft tapping of his hammer was barely audible over the morning birds, but Karen's trained ear for violations had detected it immediately. "Excuse me," she called out, marching across the pristinely maintained street in her pink velour tracksuit and matching slippers. "Excuse me." Miguel looked up, startled. He was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who worked night shifts at the hospital and had been hoping to finish this small project before Karen woke up. No such luck. "Good morning, Mrs. Pemberton," he said wearily. I don't care what you were just doing," Karen interrupted, pulling out her phone. "You're in violation of Section 4.7 of the HOA guidelines. No construction activities before 8 am. She began taking photos, her phone clicking rapidly. "And this paint color is completely unauthorized." "It's just a flag holder," Miguel said quietly, "for Independence Day next week." "I don't care if it's for the second coming," Karen snapped. "Rules are rules." Miguel's jaw tightened slightly. the first sign of the quiet man's frustration. Mrs. Pemberton, with respect, I've lived here for 12 years. I've never had a single violation. This is a 2-inch piece of metal to hold an American flag. Size doesn't matter when it comes to compliance. Karen shot back, then immediately regretted the phrasing as Miguel's eyebrows rose. I mean, you know what I mean. By now, other neighbors had begun to emerge from their houses. Mrs. Chen from next door stepped onto her porch with her coffee, shaking her head. The Johnson twins, home from college, were filming from their bedroom window upstairs. Even old Mr. Kowalski had wheeled his oxygen tank out to his driveway to watch the show. Fine, Miguel said, setting down his hammer with deliberate calm. I'll wait until 8. But Karen wasn't done. She was never done. And you'll need to submit a formal application for any exterior modifications, even decorative ones, and get that paint color approved by the architectural committee. It's the same color as my house, Miguel replied, his voice getting quieter, which everyone in the neighborhood knew was a bad sign. No, it's not. Your house is evening mist blue. This is clearly ocean breeze blue. The silence that followed was broken by a snort of laughter from Mrs. Chen's porch, then another from the Johnsons' window. Soon, the entire street was trying not to laugh at Karen's paint expertise. Karen's face flushed red. Mock me all you want, but when your property values tank, because we let standards slip, don't come crying to me. She stormed back to her house, slamming the door so hard that her own decorative wreath, which was definitely not HOA-approved autumn colors in July, fell to the ground. Inside, she immediately called her best friend and fellow HOA board member Diane. They were all laughing at me, Diane. Laughing. As if caring about our community standards is some kind of joke. What are you going to do? Diane asked, though she already knew the answer. Karen stared out her window at Miguel, who had resumed his quiet work now that it was exactly 8:00 a.m. A dangerous smile crossed her face. I'm going to show them what happens when you mess with the wrong neighbor. By 10 a.m., Karen had already submitted 3 formal complaints to the HOA board, cleared the City Code Enforcement Office, and created a detailed photo documentation folder titled Rodriguez Violations, Ongoing. But as she sat at her kitchen table, sipping her organic green tea and plotting her next move, something unexpected happened. Miguel's flag went up. It was a beautiful American flag, the kind that actually meant something to the man who'd served 2 tours in Vietnam before becoming a nurse. It snapped proudly in the morning breeze, visible from every house on the street. Karen's phone buzzed with notifications from the neighborhood group chat, but these weren't supportive messages about her vigilant rule enforcement. They were worse, much worse. Sarah Chen. Beautiful flag, Miguel. Thank you for your service. Bob Johnson. Looks great, neighbor. My boys want to get one too. Even Mrs. Peterson, who usually stayed out of neighborhood drama. So nice to see the flag displayed properly. Very respectful. Karen's eye twitched. She typed and deleted several responses before settling on. Regardless of patriotic intent, violations are violations. The board will address this at the next meeting. The responses came swift and brutal. Tom Jackson. Oh, come on, Karen. It's an American flag. Lisa Martins. Are you serious right now? Dave Kumar. Mayam. This is literally what freedom looks like. Karen's phone rang. It was Diane, her voice tight with panic. Karen, honey, you need to see Facebook. I don't do Facebook drama, you know that. Well, Facebook is doing you. The Johnson twins posted a video of this morning. It has 847 shares already. Karen's blood ran cold. What video? You, yelling about the flag holder. With the caption, HOA Karen versus American flag. It's gone viral in the county Facebook groups. Karen hung up and immediately opened her laptop. The video was everywhere. Ring doorbell footage from 3 different angles showed her confronting Miguel, her voice shrill and demanding, while he stood quietly holding a small American flag and a tiny metal bracket. The comments were savage. This is why people hate HOAs. Imagine being mad at a veteran for hanging the American flag. Karen needs a hobby that isn't ruining people's lives. But it was the last comment that made her stomach drop. Someone should organize a flag rally on his street, show him the community actually supports him. It had 312 likes. Karen slammed the laptop shut and peeked through her blinds. Miguel was in his yard, watering his small garden. He looked tired, older somehow than he had that morning. For just a moment, she felt a tiny pang of, was that guilt? But then she saw Mrs. Chen walk over with a plate of cookies, and the two of them laughed about something, and that pang turned into something else entirely. Rage. Her phone rang again. This time it was HOA President Jim Matthews, and he didn't sound happy. Karen, what the hell is going on? I've got 17 messages from board members. The management company is freaking out. And my wife just showed me a video of you arguing about paint colors at 6 a.m. Jim, I was enforcing our community standards for a flag holder for an American flag. The size and placement weren't approved. Karen, listen to me very carefully. Drop this. Drop it now. The board meeting is in 5 days, and if you push this flag thing, we're going to look like complete idiots. After he hung up, Karen sat in her silent house, surrounded by her own HOA-approved decorations and her perfectly organized filing system of neighborhood violations. She'd spent 3 years building her reputation as the person who kept Willowbrook pristine and property values high. She wasn't about to let one flag destroy everything she'd worked for. She opened her laptop again and began typing a new post in the neighborhood group. I want to clarify my position on the flag situation. While I fully support patriotism and respect for our veterans, we cannot selectively enforce community standards. Rules exist to protect everyone's investment in our neighborhood. I propose we discuss appropriate flag display guidelines at the next HOA meeting to ensure both patriotic expression and aesthetic consistency. She hit send and waited. The silence was deafening. No likes, no comments, no responses at all. But outside her window, she could see neighbors gathering in small groups, talking quietly and glancing toward her house. Something was building, and for the first time in her 3 years as the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer, Karen Pemberton realized she might have picked the wrong fight. The question was it too late to back down? You know, said Bob Johnson, watching his sons play with the neighborhood kids. This is the most I've seen everyone together since we moved in. Karen felt a warm flush of something unfamiliar. Belonging. Not the cold satisfaction of enforcing compliance, but the genuine warmth of being part of a community. I have an idea, she said suddenly. What if we made this a monthly thing? Not a rally or anything formal, just neighbors getting together, maybe rotating houses, potluck style. The idea was met with enthusiastic approval, and before Karen knew it, she was volunteering to host the first gathering. As the impromptu block party began to wind down, Miguel found himself standing next to Karen on her front lawn, both of them looking at their matching flags snapping in the breeze. Can I ask you something? Karen said. That day I asked if you were legal. Why didn't you get angry? Why didn't you report me or call me out publicly? Miguel was quiet for a long moment. Because getting angry at ignorance doesn't fix ignorance. It just makes two people angry instead of one. But I deserved it. Maybe. But what would that have accomplished? We'd still be strangers living across the street from each other, just angrier strangers. Karen nodded, understanding, but still struggling with the weight of her own actions. I don't know how you can be so forgiving. I'm not forgiving you, Miguel said, surprising her. Forgiveness implies you did something to me that I need to get over. But you didn't hurt me, Karen. You hurt yourself. You turned yourself into someone nobody wanted to be around, including you. He was right, and they both knew it. So what am I doing now? She asked. Now you're becoming the neighbor you always could have been. As the sun set over Willowbrook Drive, Karen found herself thinking about the phone call she'd received that afternoon. A reporter from Channel 7, wanting to do a follow-up story about the HOA flag controversy. Karen had politely declined, explaining that the real story wasn't about conflict or regulations or viral videos. The real story was about two neighbors who'd learned that community isn't built on rules and enforcement, but on understanding and connection. But even as Karen felt optimistic about the future, she couldn't shake the feeling that her public transformation had attracted attention beyond their quiet neighborhood. Her phone had been buzzing all week with friend requests from strangers, interview requests from podcasters, and invitations to speak at HOA conferences about community building. Karen had turned them all down, but she wondered, in a world obsessed with viral moments and redemption stories, would they let her quietly rebuild her life as just another neighbor? The next morning, she'd find out that some stories take on a life of their own, whether you want them to or not. Everything. The neighborhood hating me, the board wanting to remove me, the news making me look like a monster. She paused. The fact that I've been a terrible neighbor to someone who deserved better. McGill studied her face. Those are all different problems. Which one matters most to you? Karen thought about it, really thought about it. The last one. Then that's where we start. He stood up and walked to his kitchen, returning with another cup of coffee. Tell me about yourself, Karen. Not HOA Karen, not rule enforcement Karen, just Karen. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone wanted to know who she really was underneath all the anger and rules and desperate need for control. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours and changed everything.